Hello Internet, my name is the Golden Stalfos, and today we're going to be talking about the PlayStation 5 teardown that recently happened, and wow, it happened. I mean, that's the biggest takeaway, just, I'm really surprised that they did this, and also kind of, one, it's cool to see, but also, is this really the news we were waiting for from PlayStation? How about we get some updates on those pre-orders, maybe? um, but yeah, it was definitely very impressive to see. They got the VP of engineering to do the teardown video, which is yeesh. And obviously, it was very scripted and edited, but duh. It's still pretty cool that they did this at all. And the only reason I care, obviously, is Demon's Souls, because it's going to be PS5 exclusive, so I have to get a PS5 to go with it. I've already pre-ordered my copy of the game. I got the digital deluxe edition because I'm a sucker. I mean, it's not a good value. Don't get it. But I absolutely love the crap out of this series, and my biggest issue with Demon's Souls by far is just the lack of content. So if I have to shell out an extra $20 to get a little bit more content, I will, even though it's not great. It's not a good value. It's just not. But whatever. Why not, So that's what I did. But because of that, I have to get the game system at some point to play it on. And pre-orders still aren't available because they sold out the day before they were announced. And then sold out again a little bit later, and then sold out again. I don't know how many rounds of pre-orders there have been done. I heard some grumblings that GameStop had some extras, but I didn't hear about it until after they had already run out, so who knows? I mean, launch is still almost a month away. They can still ramp up production to meet demand. There will be units available or allocated to stores that are not pre-orderable, brick and mortar units, but who knows? We're not getting any news on that. So in the meantime, let's talk about the system specs and how weirdly easy it is to tear it apart. So let's start with the positives and then work our way through the negatives. I mean, they're kind of half and half for me. The first positive is that this system can be mounted vertically or horizontally, and moving the mount between those two positions is very easy, which is nice. Second, this heatsink, holy shit, that's a huge beefy heatsink. Jesus Christ. That is a huge fucking heatsink. Also, this motherboard looks dope. One thing that really caught me off guard about it, though, is the fact that, one, it's double-sided, which is a little odd for boards, but two, everything in it is spaced out a lot. A lot more than I would have expected. If you look at a CPU board, you just get maybe an inch of clearance between your CPU and your RAM, if that. I mean, way less than that, honestly. You've got dozens of chips, dozens of capacitors all crammed together real close. You've got your expansion slots half an inch apart from each other. And to go from that to this and just seeing oh yeah, we had tons of space, so we just arranged all of our RAM in this big circle around the CPU. Just this huge spaced out thing. That's really interesting. I imagine spacing it out like that helps with thermals, And having the board be double-sided like that makes it much harder to reproduce. So that's cool. The RAM, by the way, is pretty impressive. It's an absolute buttload of GDDR6, which, whew, that is fast RAM, man. That is some fast RAM. I was kind of surprised that it's only GRAM and no DRAM or anything. You know, just graphics. Which, like, I'm kind of conflicted about. Like, on the one hand, the graphics RAM is faster than regular CPU RAM, but on the other hand, the reason we normally have two separate RAMs is because you have two separate kinds of processors using them in two separate ways, you know, and the way GRAM is accessed is very different from the way that regular CPU RAM is accessed. And so, I mean, it also kind of makes sense that their SoC can do it all with one kind of RAM because, you know, it's both a CPU and a GPU. But I don't know, I'm just, like, having not seen it in action and not knowing exactly how it works yet, I'm skeptical but optimistic. You know, like, there are some things that make it sound really cool, and there are some things that make it sound like breaking convention. And believe it or not, we have a lot of our conventions in computer design for a reason, and that reason is because it works, right? So sometimes when something breaks convention, it might just break, if that makes any sense. I'm sure that's not really the case. They wouldn't ship a console that didn't run or didn't run as well as they wanted it to. That's ridiculous. But I'm really interested to see how it does stack up against a system with two different kinds of RAM, for example. I am also really interested to see what the performance on the Radeon graphics is. Well, for a couple of reasons. First of all, in this, they only mention the teraflops, which, like, I guess, like, teraflops matter for raw GPU compute, but that doesn't necessarily translate to the best games, right? Like, the last Radeon card had more teraflop output than the current lineup of NVIDIA cards that just came out. And it wasn't as good as last gen's Radeon or NVIDIA cards, right? Like, you know, when it came to game performance, it was still terrible, basically, because they were just using it all wrong with their drivers and stuff. And honestly, what else do you expect from Radeon? You know, like this is what they have always done with their graphics cards. So I don't know. I've never really been a fan of AMD graphics cards because they've always been a far second in terms of performance. And like, even if it is better, you know, even if it is cheaper, I'd rather just get the one that's better. You know, like, so what if I have to save up a little bit longer, you know, like, it's not that big a difference. You know, a lot of times with the cards that came out, you know, competing with each other, you could get 2 or 3 times the performance with NVIDIA without spending 2 or 3 times as much money, right? So it was still worthwhile to make that upgrade, but or to choose, you know, one over the other. And obviously, AMD has made some huge leaps in the last couple of years, especially with their CPUs. But, you know, like I said, their last GPU launch still wasn't that impressive because they still couldn't figure out how to do game drivers. And I don't know. Hopefully they learned from that mistake, and their new whatever the fuck it is that they're launching in a couple of months will be so good it blows us all out of the water, but who knows? Um, and hopefully the shit that's in the PS5 and Xbox One is just as good as, those new cards that are supposed to blow us out of the water, right? But all of that remains to be seen. I am a little bit disappointed in the CPU though. Like before seeing anything else about it, I think the CPU is kind of underwhelming. They said it was, I believe, 8 cores at 3.5 gigahertz, which isn't terrible, right? It's not bad, but my CPU from 2 years ago is better than that. And I mean, like, it's not even it's just an i7. Like it was the special unlocked one that they did for their anniversary thing, but the binned CPU thing they did, but it's still just an i7, and like, I don't know, man. For the amount of money that this thing is going to cost me, having a processor that's worse than the processor I got 2 years ago is, and especially because it is AMD, and while again AMD have made great strides, there's still a lot of proprietary Intel technology that I really like, hyper threading and stuff. But I mean, I'm sure it's more than adequate for playing console games, but, and I mean, like, the CPU should be more than good enough to run console games at 60 FPS or whatever, like, I'm not worried about it. It's just, on the spec list, it sounds kind of unimpressive compared to what else we can do. Like, there are a lot of CPUs out there nowadays that clock at 5. Well, I mean, usually you have to overclock it to make that happen, but still. So, and it may not sound like that makes a huge difference, but it really does in terms of, like, performance speed. However, the PS5 does have some other things to make up for performance issues. Part of the reason why I think they got rid of regular RAM is because of the special way they're doing SSD and the SSD cache with a unique microcontroller that can basically just make you boot directly from SSD with as if it were RAM, which is insane. Like, it's insane actually, the way it supposedly works. Like, it should, in theory, speed up load times to be almost non-existent, which I would love, but then again, we all know the games are going to come out for this thing that are so big that they still push the load times to be like 10 minutes long. Not just big, but also poorly optimized. Like, I wholeheartedly expect that if Elden Ring comes out on PS5, it'll have the worst loading times. You just won't even be able to believe it. I would be willing to bet money on that, because just look at their track record with that. I mean, Jesus. So, yeah. I am looking forward to natively upscaling, like, Bloodborne and stuff like that. That'd be really dope. And overall, like, the CPU specs seem, or like the specs in general seem more than good enough to run, current gen games and hopefully next gen games as well. Even with advanced graphics and stuff. So that's all great. There's one other thing that I think might be a negative, and that's the fan. Notice I said the fan, singular, because, yeah, we're still building consoles like it's 2002. I just, like, yes, the heatsink in here is massive and very cool, but like, and they're using liquid metal, which is really impressive, honestly, because I mean, seriously, liquid metal cooling in your, or well, it's just the thermal paste type stuff, but it's liquid metal as a conductor of heat between the CPU slash GPU and the heat spreader, which is cool. That's really cool. But then you've got this fan. One fan. Just all on its own. Just sucks air in from the front and pushes it out the back like a fucking water wheel. And that's it. That's your whole cooling system. That's why it has these big dumbass popped collar thing going on. Because it needs open airflow through those fins. Ugh. I mean, again, I'm sure they tested the thermals and made sure it works, but like, whew, man, that CPU is way too beefy to be cooled by one fan that is so far away from it. Not to mention all of the other components, including, future M.2 expansions that are not connected to the heatsink at all, And I mean, M.2 drives don't need a ton of cooling, but it's typically nice to give them a little IHS thing, just a little metal thing you put over the top, and it helps. But yeah, I don't know. I don't trust one fan, no matter how big it is, to cool this. Like, I just no, it doesn't sound like it's going to work out too well. Now, I realize that lots of consoles in the past have had much worse cooling setups than this and still run just fine, But there have also been lots of those consoles that overheated and died, More famously on the Xbox side, but I mean, everyone remembers the PS2 Slim. Ugh, that was a nightmare. Now, this cooling solution does look pretty beefy, and it should probably outpace, the cooling solutions from things like the PS4. But I don't know if it's going to be enough for this CPU, GPU combo, and all of the RAM and everything. Like, this is a beefy system. It seems like it's going to run hot. And also, it's got this huge, bulky power supply, 650 watts, which seems a little low considering the quality of the parts they're putting in. But, I mean, they are, integrated built-in parts, so they're probably spec'd to run at slightly lower voltages and stuff. But like, the main thing about this power supply is that it has this big L shape. So like the heatsink takes up one huge chunk of space underneath the board, and then the power supply takes up this other huge chunk of space underneath the board. And I feel like that power supply is probably going to run hot. It doesn't seem to have its own cooling solution. And it's definitely not connected to the heatsink at all. So, also, this machine is fucking huge, and it's going to be fucking heavy. That heatsink is easily like 5 pounds on its own. Like, just look at that monster. And I'd probably guess the same for the fucking power supply, honestly. That thing is huge. And regular power supplies aren't that light anyway. So I fully anticipate this system weighing more than the PS3 did. And it's bigger than the PS3 was. And wow. And again, when you look at the board, it makes you question why it needs to be this big, because like seriously, the board is really small compared to the overall size of the unit. It feels like most of the unit size is just cooling capacity, which is cool, I guess, but I feel like there were probably some designs you could have used that would have made your system a lot smaller and still kept just as cool. You know, like especially because the board itself is so small. And again, it's spaced out a lot, so it could probably be made much smaller if they were more confident in their cooling abilities and everything. So I don't know. It's interesting. Um, Obviously, I fully expect it to work as advertised because, duh, anytime I buy something, I expect it to work as advertised. But ultimately, I'm not quite as impressed with the spec list as I thought I would be. Um, and the single fan solution especially is a little bit concerning. Um, so yeah, hopefully, if there are issues with systems overheating to death, we'll be able to get returns processed, but who knows. Um, it's definitely making me consider that warranty a lot more than I would have before. But oh well, we'll have to find out. Also, the panels pop off on their own, and you can, replace them. They're obviously going to be selling, panel customization. If they ever have some Demon Souls ones, I'll probably pick those up. Just because that's the only reason I'm getting the machine in the first place. Might as well announce it to anyone who happens to be able to see it. So yeah. Honestly, I think the overall design of this system is stupid in terms of aesthetics. Um, like it's so big that I'm gonna have to put it right next to my PC, and just work from there. But because it's basically the same size as an ATX case, but it looks so dumb with the weird pop collar thing and just like it just looks so dumb. And again, I don't think it needed to be this big in order to have proper cooling or heat supplies or stuff. Like realistically, if they built this board the way they build, PC boards, it would be half as big as it is. And and like from there you've got a lot of shrinking you can do. I mean, it's a 650 watt power supply, which cool, whatever, but like all power supplies nowadays come in this same size little brick, and you could have even gone for 850, so you have a lot more wiggle room and kept the same size, right? And I think that the one that he pulled out of the system there looks, at least in the video, it looks to me like it's bigger than a regular power supply. So I don't know. And like it just seems to me like they probably could have made it a lot smaller if they wanted to. And it's weird that they didn't want to, because in the past, that's been one of the main things that PlayStation does with their consoles, is they make them, really small and cool looking. And this design honestly just feels like they're trying to ape the Xbox 360 for some reason, but bigger. And I don't know why they would do that, because like so hopefully it runs well, and I can ignore how it looks because I just need it to play Demon Souls, you know? Oh, there is one thing that I didn't know about until I watched Modern Vintage Gamers video about it. Apparently, PlayStation VR has a proprietary adapter that isn't included in the I/O ports for this machine. So in order to use PSVR, you need a dongle. God damn, PlayStation, how do you fuck that up? Like, VR is one of your biggest selling points. How do you screw up your proprietary connection thing? Or is your second gen connection just going to be Thunderbolt? That's probably what it is. That's probably why, is because they've just decided that the next headset they release is just going to be a Thunderbolt connection, and they're going to forget about the proprietary thing entirely. Because Thunderbolt is better than whatever their proprietary thing is, I guarantee it. But yeah, it's amazing that people will need a dongle to use their PlayStation headset on their new PlayStation system. 10 out of 10. Good job, guys. Also, I'm a little bit questioning the placement of the I/O. So it has one USB port up front, which, like, I realize no one really plugs their controllers directly into the system anymore because wireless. But, you know, if your batteries die while you're in the middle of a game, you're going to plug in just to, you know, get you through your session, right? I've done that a lot. Maybe they anticipate that to be less of an issue. I don't know what the battery life is like on the new controllers. But the fact that you can only do that with one, controller at a time is weird. And the fact that that controller, is going through a USB 2 port instead of USB 3 is weird. I mean, like you don't need USB 3 for controller charging, but, it's the front I/O. So, like, that's the one you're going to interact with most if you need to, like, plug in a USB or something. And so you're going to have USB 2 instead of USB 3 whenever you plug in. And, like, that might not matter because a bunch of thumb drives are still USB 2 anyway, but, like, it could come up. It would be nice if it was USB 3, and it would be nice if there was more than one of them. I mean, and also, it's just weird seeing USB 2 right next to a Thunderbolt. Like, why? like you knew to include Thunderbolt because that's the next gen badass new thing, but you didn't include the current gen cool thing. Except that on the back, there's two of them. There's two USB 3 connectors on the back, and I'm just like, why? Why are they on the back and not the front? Is that who decided that? Why did you decide that? Because that just makes them annoying to access. And presumably those are going to be used for, drives that don't ever need to move, right? But, or connections that don't ever need to move. I mean, there is a reasonable use case for that. Like, I don't know if anyone knows about this, but there are USB extender cables that can connect your USB port from across the room. So maybe that's the intended use case. I don't know. It's weird, to say the least. Maybe their charging station goes through those USB ports, but I would expect it to have its own charging thing, its own power supply thing instead. So I have no idea. I mean, it's nice that they're there. It's just the placement that's a little bit weird. And that's really it. Like, the I/O is very basic. It's just Ethernet, USBs, some Thunderbolt, some power supply in, and that's basically it, you know. Oh, and HDMI, of course. Which, actually, it's kind of weird that it's only HDMI and not also DisplayPort, considering how advanced this system is and how advanced the graphics are. Like, I realize consoles are made for TVs, but you can use a monitor as a TV, and you can use a TV as a monitor. Like, my particular setup at the moment is I've got my PC in my entertainment system hooked up to two TVs as my primary, like, method of entertainment for all things. You know, all my games, all my streaming, everything goes through my PC. And I have a couple of consoles that I switch to for exclusive titles and stuff. You know, but and the PS5 will be added to that list, obviously. But to me, you know, it seems weird because a lot of people who are PC enthusiasts are used to using DisplayPort. Like, my NVIDIA graphics card has one HDMI port and 3 DisplayPort outputs. I don't have a DisplayPort monitor, so I don't actually use those. It's a little bit annoying, actually. But I do realize that that would be a desired feature for a lot of customers, so it's weird that it's not there, since this is, you know, kind of supposed to compete with current gen PC stuff. So yeah, a lot of interesting stuff going on. Obviously, I don't really care about consoles that much. I only play them for the exclusive titles, and that's the only reason you should get a console, really, is if they have something that you can't get elsewhere. Because if you know, save up a little bit longer and build your PC correctly, then you'll have, you know, a system that runs every game perfectly for the next, like, 10 years. and then you can do the same thing again 10 years later and still be ahead of the pack for the next, like, you know, 5 or 6 years. So to me, a PC is just a much better investment, right? Like, by the time the next console generation comes out, I should still be using this PC. And I built it 2 years ago during the previous console generation. And so, you know, to me, it's a much better investment, and I'm much more interested in doing that. But I do understand that it's more of an investment, right? Like, the PS5 is $500, and I think my system was $15, something like that. I bought a bunch of, like, crap that I didn't need for the system, like the USB extenders to connect my keyboard from across the living room, shit like that. But the main system was like 15. But again, it'll last me a few years. It'll last me quite a few years longer than the PS5 will. And so I don't care about the PS5. I'm only getting it because Demon's Souls. And if at any point I find out Demon's Souls is not PS5 exclusive, you're out of there. So yeah, there's that. And that's basically it. All right. Oh, and also my aforementioned complete lack of interest in consoles is why I'm not talking about Xbox at all, because you don't need an Xbox to play Xbox games. You can run them natively on your Windows 10 computer, because it's Windows, and Windows is Microsoft, and Xbox is Microsoft, and they made their shit compatible because money. So, I don't know why you would buy an Xbox, honestly. Like, PS5 is kind of, you know, forced my hand because of this exclusive, but that's the only game I really care about. I mean, I guess I might pick up Spider-Man just because I have the console, and why not? But honestly, I don't give a shit about Miles Morales. I played the when the fuck did that game come out? 2018? The whatever the last Marvel Spider-Man was for the PS4, and it was like I didn't like it that much. It really doesn't compare to Spider-Man PS2 or Spider-Man 2 for the PS2 rather. Um, which actually I didn't even play the PlayStation version of that game. I played the GameCube version back in the day. Um, but yeah, so I might get that just out of curiosity, but I'm not like anticipating it or anything. Uh, and that's it. Those are all my thoughts on the PS5 and its current launching situation. We still won't know much more about the launch and availability and stuff for a while. It launches on November 12th, which is dangerously close to Election Day, so don't forget about Election Day. But I don't know if I'll be able to get one at launch, unfortunately. I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna do my best for sure, but who can say? Who can say? So yeah, that's the video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next live. Laters. Okay, end card time. I'm supposed to tell you to like, comment, subscribe, all that stupid YouTube shit. There's a bell thingy, whatever. I have all the social media stuff, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. Mostly I use Facebook and Twitter to tell you about my Twitch and YouTube uploads. I've got a Patreon, but Patreon is one of those things where people who can afford to throw away money give money to people who can't. And so if you can't afford to throw away money, then you shouldn't be doing that. And if you can afford to throw away money, consider charities. There's a pandemic, there's global warming, there's millions of people in the world who don't have toilets, which is just awful. So I've linked a few charities in the description down below in case you're interested in that. And if you can't donate money to a charity, consider donating some of your time, because that's also very useful. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.